Could you tell us a little bit about the evolution education in USA? There were some attempts to put creationism into the high school curriculum, and there was some serious opposition to that. What do you think about those?
In the United States, there is, according to our Constitution, there cannot be any support of religion or religious teachings in any government institution, such as a governmental university or a public school. And there have been attempts by creationists to make creation taught in schools. These efforts have been repelled in the courts of the United States, including the Supreme Court. And so we require continual effort to maintain the integrity of science in education in the public schools in the United States. But it is a continuing effort, a continuing battle. And so at the present time, for example, creationists have invented a new term. They call it intelligent design, and they don't say who the intelligent designer is, but it is obvious that this is a religious doctrine and not a scientific doctrine. And so, again, it has been necessary to challenge this effort in the court system, and there was a very important court decision in Pennsylvania several years ago, which said the intelligent design is a religious idea, it is not science, and so it should not be taught in any science classes in a public institution.
Okay, so what is intelligent design and why is it science?
Intelligent design, the claim is that organisms, living things, are too complicated to evolve by natural processes, and therefore they must have been created by some kind of intelligent designer. This clearly must be a supernatural entity, since they say that natural processes are not sufficient. Science can only be concerned with natural processes. And the reason for that is that only natural processes have a regularity, have any kind of law-like behavior, such as gravity or the behavior of chemical elements. These are regular, they are predictable, and it is that predictability, that consistency, which makes science possible. A supernatural explanation involves an agent who has unknown powers, unknown wishes or intentions, and so there can be no prediction, no scientific understanding of what such an agent would do. Therefore, all supernatural explanations are non-scientific. They make no predictions which science can test by any kind of observation or experiment. And for this reason, there is a sharp demarcation between scientific approaches to understanding the natural world, the physical world, the world of living things. There's a sharp demarcation between scientific approaches that involve testable hypotheses based on the regularities of nature and supernatural hypotheses which are unable to be tested by the mechanisms of science.
Okay, so is it fair to say there is not a shred of evidence in favor of intelligent design, physical evidence?
That is exactly the case. Whereas in contrast, there is so much evidence for evolution. Evidence that comes from fossils, evidence that comes from the geographic distribution of organisms, evidence that comes from comparing the anatomical and the physical, the physiological, the biochemical characteristics of organisms, evidence that comes from DNA and molecular biology, all the evidence from biology. Thousands and thousands of pieces of evidence are consistent with evolution and support the claim that evolution has occurred.
Biology has changed drastically from Darwin's time. What are the hot topics in biology right now? What are the questions that we're looking into?
Of course, there are so many. Biology, including the study of evolution, has advanced just in the last 50 years, since the last Darwin celebrations 50 years ago. All of biology, including evolutionary studies, has advanced at a pace that is unbelievable, largely because of the integration of molecular understanding and evolutionary principles. There are many different topics today that are very exciting. I think one of the most important is understanding the evolution of how individual organisms develop. And so the difference between a human and any other species has to do with processes of how the fertilized egg that begins life of a human, or the fertilized egg that begins life of a giraffe, how these become such different organisms. And that is based on how the genes are acting. And there are different genes that have evolved in the different species, and how those genes make the physical body of a human being or the physical body of any other species. How those genes have evolved and those processes, the developmental processes have evolved, that is a major topic. Another very important area of enormous advance is comparing the complete genomes of different species. So we now know the DNA sequence of the complete DNA sequence of the human genome and of the chimpanzee genome and the mouse and many other species. And comparing these genomes enables us to understand how the genes have evolved and given rise to different characteristics. But also, this evolutionary approach helps people who want to understand the genome so that aids their effort in understanding how genes actually work.
Darwin's idea of natural selection plus genetics is called the modern synthesis. And now there was a meeting last summer in Altenburg. They were called the Altenburg 16. They put forward a new idea called extended evolutionary synthesis. Your friend Massimo Pugliese was the leader. Do you think they have anything going for them?
The evolutionary synthesis is the name for the very important series of advances that took place mostly in the 1940s and early 1950s, which gave rise to the comprehensive theory of evolution that includes genetics. My view is that evolutionary synthesis has been extended steadily almost every year since the 1950s. It has that evolutionary biology has expanded so that it has reached out to include explanations of, at the molecular level, explanations of development of organisms, as I was just describing. It explains various ecological phenomena. It has been reaching out and extending itself continually. The meeting to which you refer, they are suggesting that there may be additional mechanisms of evolution that we poorly understand. And that is possible. They do not deny the principles of evolutionary change, the mechanisms of evolutionary change that we now understand. But they're suggesting that there may be some additional things that we need to learn. And that is surely true. We don't understand everything about how genes act. And we are learning a great deal about genetic mechanisms, and those new discoveries at the molecular level will have to be integrated into a more complete understanding of the evolutionary process.
Okay, there are some scientists who oppose religious views, like Richard Dawkins being one of them. Do you think scientists should do that, or is religion a whole different realm, like Stephen Jay Gould would say, no mind, non-overlapping magisterium?
My inclination is to side much more with Stephen Jay Gould. I think it is very important, as we said earlier, to distinguish scientific explanations from the world of religious thinking. And I believe that it is possible for each of these two realms of thought to respect the other. I was at a conference in Rome 2 months ago, which was at one of the Vatican universities, and this was called by the religious faculty of the Gregorian University, and it was a symposium on the mechanisms of evolution and how those are related to theological understanding within a Christian framework. And it was a wonderful meeting in which everyone respected each other's point of view. And the theologians accepted evolution. They said, of course, there's so much evidence for evolution, we cannot deny that. We have to understand how that is related to the religious concepts of creation. That perhaps evolution is the way in which God has created. And likewise, from the other side, the scientists who were there, I think, respected the history of religious thought, the attempts to understand aspects of the world that perhaps transcend the purely physical. I don't think most scientists would suppose that science is a sufficient description of human values, for example. Human values are not within the realm of science, but they're very important. And a religious framework may be one important way of enhancing our understanding and our development of human values. And so I personally think that there is room for both realms of human experience and human effort to understand, and that there should be respect on either side.
My final question is, you have written extensively about evolution, and the factual validity of evolution is now beyond reasonable doubt. And my question is, why do you so find it uplifting? What is the beauty of evolution? Why do you write extensively about it?
The more I became I entered the university in 1959, which was the last time we had a big Darwin celebration. That was 100 years after the origin of species. And ever since then, I have been continually excited by the ideas of evolution. And it's because it explains so much about living things. As I said earlier, that the fundamental ideas of evolution can explain all kinds of the features of organisms, ranging from their DNA sequences all the way to their behavior, their physiology, their life histories, the differences between different kinds of organisms, their geographic distributions, the existence of different species in the past that are now extinct from those that are present today. So every aspect of life, of the living world, can be illuminated by an understanding that it has a history, and that this history involves changes by natural selection, which enables us to understand features of organisms that otherwise would be baffling, would be mysterious. And so that's part of the answer. For me personally also, ever since I was a child, I have been fascinated by the wonderful diversity of life. We have millions of species of organisms, of wonderful creatures to look at. If you go into the sea, or if you look carefully at small insects on land, or the diversity of plants. And I've been fascinated and aesthetically elevated by this great diversity of life. And evolution helps me understand how this wonderful diversity came to be.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.